Shadows of the dorm. I don't usually talk about this, not to anyone. Most of the time, I try to shove it to the back of my mind, but sometimes the memories come creeping in, uninvited, like they've been waiting all these years for me to remember them. Maybe writing it down is my way of exorcising it. Maybe it's just me torturing myself. Either way, here's how it all started. I was in 8th grade when I got sent to boarding school. A big suburban campus that looked peaceful enough during the day, full of neat brick buildings, trimmed lawns, and kids rushing to classes. But at night, it was different. At night, that place felt like it was breathing and not in a normal, living way. I shared a dorm room with a kid named Weston. At first, we were just two strangers thrown into the same box, 2 beds, 2 desks, and a tiny, shared closet. He was quiet, too quiet maybe, but I didn't notice it immediately. Weeks passed and I began noticing things. Small things at first. He had a list of things I wasn't allowed to bring into the room. He handed it to me like it was a normal custom, like all roommates did this, and I just stared at it confused. Frogs, salt. Nothing else made sense. Frogs, salt. I didn't even eat much salt at the time. What was I supposed to do, smuggle a frog under my bed? I laughed it off, thinking he was just weird, but he wasn't joking. Weston had a seriousness about him, a stillness that made the list feel like a decree, not a suggestion. It didn't stop there. He muttered to himself at night under his breath, whispering, not quietly like someone talking in their sleep, but deliberate like he was talking to someone, and no one was ever there. I'd wake up hearing it sometimes, and I'd lie frozen, pretending to sleep. At first, it freaked me out. Eventually, I got used to it, or maybe I just trained myself to ignore it. Then came the notebook. The little black notebook he kept buried under his mattress. He never let anyone see it. Curiosity got the better of me one afternoon when he left the room. I found it. Mostly blank pages, but some had lists of names. Names of kids from school. Some crossed out. I scrolled to the end. My heart stopped when I saw my own name. Not crossed out, just there. I didn't know what to make of it. A list of people he liked, didn't like, something worse. The secrecy alone made my stomach churn. For weeks after, I walked around feeling like he could somehow know. I was constantly checking behind me, feeling his eyes even when he wasn't there. And maybe that fear was valid, because one night it happened. I woke up, pitch black. At first I thought I had woken to his muttering, but no. My blood ran cold when I realized he was standing over my bed, smiling. Hands raised like he was about to do something, frozen mid-motion. I screamed. He didn't flinch, didn't even blink, just stood there. When I demanded to know what he was doing, he said I had been talking in my sleep. Just like that, calm as if standing over someone's bed at 2 in the morning was normal. I couldn't move. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might explode. He returned to his bed and I stayed awake the rest of the night, shaking, unable to sleep. The days after were worse. I began spending more time outside the dorm with friends, anywhere but that room, but nothing prepared me for what came next. One night I returned to the room and found a garden snake coiled on my bed, a live snake. I screamed, froze, and looked at Weston. He sat at his desk, expressionless, almost bored. He apologized, claimed it was a harmless prank. Then he said something that still haunts me. "What do you mean, they're everywhere?" And just like that, the snake slithered into a jar he opened as if it wanted to be caught. Weeks passed, each night heavier than the last. Then came the night that I can still see perfectly, as if it's carved into my brain. I woke up, or thought I did. My body was paralyzed. A dark mass swirled above my ceiling, alive, pulsing, breathing, and it started descending. Claws, long and sharp, scraped my bed frame. It reached for me. And then, like it had been burned or scared off, it recoiled and began thrashing, flying around the room, throwing desks, opening the closet, and finally smashing through the window, disappearing into the night. I snapped fully awake, my neck already pointing at the shattered window. The shards were falling, still glinting in the darkness. The bed frame had scratches, deep ones just like in my vision. Weston was asleep, snoring. I shook him, screamed at him, but he didn't wake. And I realized with absolute horror that what I had thought was a nightmare was real. When the Ra arrived, he just escorted us both out. The next day, Weston was gone. His things disappeared. The administration moved me to another room. I never saw him again. I never asked why, because I knew deep down there was no answer that would make sense. After that, my mind shut off a lot of my memories from that school. The fear had become too large to process, but it wasn't the last time I'd feel the shadow of someone or something watching me while I slept. Years later, it started again, but somewhere else. Grandparents' farm, Pennsylvania. I spent summers at my grandparents' farm. 40 acres of woods, fields, and the old house that creaked with every gust of wind. The attic, where I slept, overlooked the backyard. It was the only room on the third floor, slanted ceilings, a single window staring into the dark. At first it was peaceful, then I noticed footsteps on the attic stairs, soft, deliberate. One night the door handle turned. I shut my flashlight off and pretended to sleep. In the morning, nothing. My grandpa said the house made noises. Raccoons. I nodded, but I knew what I saw. 3 nights later I woke up again. My bed shook. A figure stood at the foot of my bed, shadowed, indistinct. I closed my eyes and counted to 100. When I looked again, it was gone. That summer the occurrences continued. Closet doors opened. Footsteps at night. Shadows that didn't belong. I convinced myself it was my imagination, as kids do. When I finally told my cousin Francisco, who visited weeks later, I expected him to laugh. Instead, he told me the thing touched him, fingers tracing his face, sinking into the mattress beside him, rough, scratchy hands that weren't human. Hearing him confirm what I feared, it wasn't imagination, was worse than any night I'd ever spent awake. The girl in the window. I wasn't prepared for what came after my time at the boarding school or the experiences at my grandparents' farm. You'd think the world would have calmed down after all that. My brain would have learned to distinguish between imagination and reality. But it didn't. Sometimes, I wonder if the universe just decided that I was an easy target for things that should never exist. I was 9 years old when this happened. My parents had moved us into a narrow townhouse, sandwiched tightly between 2 identical buildings. The 3rd floor was mine. My window faced the house behind ours, maybe 20 feet away. For a long time there was never anyone there. Nothing. I would sometimes peek through out of curiosity, imagining who could possibly live in a house so close. And then one day I saw her. A girl, same age as me, dark hair pulled into a ponytail and wearing a yellow sweater that stuck in my memory like sunlight trapped in glass. She waved. I waved back. She stepped out of the frame of the window, and for a moment I thought she had disappeared like a magic trick. But the next day, same time, same place, 3:30 p.m., right after school, she was there again. Every day after that, like clockwork. We developed a game, or maybe a routine. She would hold up drawings, I'd guess what they were. I would show her my homework and she would give a thumbs up or down. On warmer days, I would try to talk to her through the glass, but she never opened her window. She would smile and point to her ear, like the sound couldn't pass through the barrier. I assumed her parents were strict. Maybe I was right, maybe not. Then curiosity turned into concern. One night around 2:00 a.m., tapping woke me. I went to the window expecting shadows, the moonlight, maybe a raccoon. But it was her, dark hair, yellow sweater, and not smiling. She pressed both hands against the glass and moved her lips frantically. I couldn't hear her, but her breath fogged the window in the spring air, and I swear she mouthed the words, "Help me." I crawled back into bed, heart hammering. I didn't know what to do. The tapping continued for a few minutes before stopping. The next day she was gone, for 3 days. I thought I had done something wrong by not understanding her message. Then on the 4th night she returned. Same motions, same desperation. My stomach churned with a fear I didn't understand. I confronted reality the next day. I climbed our back fence to the neighbor's garden and found Mrs. Murphy tending to her plants. I smiled, waved. She smiled back, but it faltered quickly. She asked how long I had been seeing her. I described the girl. Mrs. Murphy's face went blank and she told me to go back inside. I didn't need more explanation at that moment. My heart knew something was very wrong. After that, things changed. My parents moved my bed to the opposite wall, hung thick curtains to block the windows. They told me it was for sleep, but I knew better. I wasn't allowed to go to the window anymore. The girl, my only companion, my only connection to someone else, was gone. My parents acted like I was imagining things, and for years I doubted myself, until high school when the truth was revealed. Mrs. Murphy had explained to my mom what had happened. Years before, the house had a daughter named Jenna, 11 years old, hit by a car right outside, wearing the same yellow sweater. The family had moved away. The room I had been seeing her in was sealed. My mother didn't elaborate on why, but Mrs. Murphy, spiritual and old-fashioned, had tried to keep the girl's spirit from wandering further. Even now, I think about her sometimes. In dreams, she comes back. Not the girl with the stain, the desperate child, just a presence. A reminder that not everything is as it seems, that even in the ordinary, the unimaginable waits for you. And the world didn't stop giving me experiences after that. No, it escalated. I think it started in high school when I moved to a new home. By then, the fear of the boarding school and the farms had faded slightly, replaced by normal teenage anxiety. But windows, reflective surfaces, the idea of being watched, all of it stayed. One night I caught movement in the reflection of a mirror in my room. At first I thought it was me, maybe my own imagination playing tricks. But no, the reflection didn't match my movements. It lingered behind me, slightly off, like it had a mind of its own. I spun around, nothing, but I could feel it. Always in the corner of my vision, shadows, shapes that shouldn't exist. I began moving my furniture, covering mirrors, keeping curtains drawn tight. My parents noticed my odd behavior, but I always smiled, explained it away. Imaginary fears, growing pains. It was the repetition that got to me. The fact that these experiences weren't isolated, weren't a one-time scare. They were constant. Boarding school, farm, the girl in the window, reflections that moved, shadows that lingered longer than they should. I began to notice patterns. Certain times of day, certain rooms, certain angles. And then came the attic at my grandparents' old house. After they passed, I went back. Alone, I had to. Something in me demanded it. The house was the same, though emptier. The attic still smelled of wood and dust. I stayed in the room I had slept in as a child, and for the first few nights nothing happened. Relief washed over me, false relief. The third night I woke to movement. Shadows shifting across the ceiling, footsteps on the stairs. I told myself it was nothing. But then the mattress sank like someone invisible was sitting at the edge. My heart raced. I could feel fingers rough, scratching, tracing my arms, my face. I froze, eyes closed. This time I knew it wasn't imagination. I ran out of the house, down the steps, into the yard. The woods were silent, too silent. I didn't look back. I never went upstairs again. But it didn't stop there, not even close. When I moved out on my own, I thought I could escape. My apartment was normal, bland, safe. No attic, no dorm room, no narrow townhouse, but windows remained a trigger. Reflections in glass, the tiniest flicker of movement, and my pulse would spike. I had dreams, vivid, terrifying, where the girl in yellow would appear, but her smile had changed. Now she wasn't playful. Now she watched, patient, expectant, as if waiting for something I couldn't understand. I started noticing other things too. Sounds. At first subtle, a creak, a whisper, a breath. Then movement, shadows across walls, flashes of color in the corner of my eye. Nothing fully materialized, but the sense of presence was overwhelming. I began documenting it, writing down what I saw, heard, and felt. I called it my surveillance log, though it was more a journal of terror. Some nights I would wake up and find objects moved. Not drastically, just enough to make me question reality. A book that had been on the floor, now on the desk. A pen that had rolled under the bed, now on my nightstand. Sometimes it was subtle. Sometimes it was blatant. Always it felt like someone or something was observing me, learning me, testing me. Sleep became impossible. Dreams were no longer a retreat, they were battlegrounds. I would wake exhausted, heart racing, sweat soaking my sheets, but I couldn't stop. Writing it down became a compulsion, my only anchor to reason. To reality. If I didn't record it, I felt like I would lose my mind entirely. Reflections and the final haunting. After years of trying to rationalize everything, I've realized that you can't. You can't reason with shadows, with echoes, with presences that defy the laws of the ordinary world. I learned this the hard way. It started subtly again after I moved into my first apartment alone. I told myself that being independent would give me control, that a new place, my own space, would shield me from the weirdness that haunted my childhood. But I was wrong. Windows, mirrors, reflective surfaces, they were portals, it seemed, to everything I had tried to forget. It began with reflections in my bathroom mirror. One evening I washed my hands and caught something in the corner of my eye. At first I thought it was my imagination, a trick of light, but it lingered. I spun around. Nothing. Heart racing, I stared back at my reflection. And then I saw it, her, the girl in yellow, just standing behind me in the mirror, not smiling, watching, waiting. I spun back, empty apartment. No furniture shifted, no sound, but the feeling remained, the presence. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just existed there in the mirror and in the shadows behind my eyes. I slept lightly that night, one eye open, body tense like a coiled spring, waiting for her to act. Days turned into weeks and the sightings continued. Not only in mirrors. I saw movement in windows reflecting the street outside. I saw flickers in the polished surfaces of my kitchen appliances. Once, while brushing my teeth, I caught a glimpse of a shadow moving across the ceiling, tall, humanoid, unnatural. I blinked and it vanished, leaving only the normal, empty apartment. But then things started escalating. Objects moved on their own. Small at first, a pen here, a book there. Then bigger, a chair toppled, drawers left open, my bedsheets crumpled and disturbed when I had clearly left them perfectly folded. And worst of all, I began hearing things, footsteps, low whispers, humming. Sometimes it sounded like a child laughing softly but not warmly, a laughter that felt hollow and cruel. I began recording everything, every sound, every movement. I had to. Otherwise, I would convince myself I was losing my mind entirely, and the recordings, they were telling. On some, I could hear the faintest breathing, not my own. Sometimes it was synchronized with my heart rate, as if whatever was there could sense me, my fear, my pulse. On others, there were knocks, soft at first, then pounding, echoing through the apartment with no logical source. And then one night it happened. The incident I can never fully explain, the one that broke the barrier between disbelief and terror. I woke to the sound of tapping, not a soft, gentle tap. No, rapid, insistent, urgent. It was coming from my window which I had locked and covered with heavy curtains. I froze. The tapping grew louder, faster, my body locked in place. I forced myself to open my eyes, and then I saw her. The girl, yellow sweater, dark hair, but wrong. Her eyes were black, voids that sucked the light out of the room. Her hands pressed against the glass just as they had years ago. Only now her movements were jerky, unnatural, like she wasn't entirely human. I wanted to scream, to run, to hide, but I couldn't. Fear held me in place. The glass didn't reflect her entirely. Her body seemed incomplete, fragmented. The corner of the window shimmered like water, distorting her form. I realized she wasn't just outside. She was both outside and inside. My mind reeled, my stomach twisted. And then a voice, soft, whispering, yet unmistakable. "It's your turn." I bolted upright. Curtains tore as I tried to pull them closed, but it was too late. The air in the room grew cold, unnatural. Shadows stretched along the walls, twisting, coiling like smoke. The lights flickered. I could hear scratching. On the walls, the ceiling, the floor, something was moving toward me, something not quite human. I dove for the hallway, but the shadows followed. I ran down the stairs, apartment doors blurred around me, as if the building itself had changed, corridors stretching impossibly long. I felt her presence behind me, cold, relentless. I reached the exit, gasping, and froze. The street was empty, silent, too silent. And then I saw it, across the street in a building identical to mine, a window, and there she was, watching, smiling. Yellow sweater bright in the dim light. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't even scream. I realized with a cold, sinking certainty that she had never been a child, not really. She was something else. Something that had learned to observe, to wait, to mimic, to lure. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed. Eventually, I turned and ran. I didn't stop. Apartment after apartment, street after street. And yet I could feel her presence behind me, following, always, waiting, patient. The next days were worse. Sleep was impossible. My apartment felt like a trap. Every reflective surface, every window became a potential portal. I covered everything I could, but the sense of being watched never left. My journal grew thick, pages filled with accounts of shadows, whispers, scratches, and glimpses of her. And every page, every line felt like a tether. Because the more I documented, the more I realized she could feel me. She could track me. My fear nourished her, sustained her. I started to question reality. Friends, family, strangers, they all seemed like potential threats or witnesses to something beyond understanding. I could no longer tell what was real and what was illusion. Every glance out a window, every reflection in a shop front, every movement in the corner of my eye could be her. And then came the final incident that changed everything. I was in my apartment late at night, exhausted, trembling, my journal open beside me. I was writing about a shadow I had seen slip under the door when I was in the kitchen, and then I heard it. The softest, gentlest tap, like fingertips against glass. My heart stopped. I didn't dare look, but the tapping grew louder, insistent, urgent. And then behind me in the mirror she appeared. Yellow sweater, dark hair, black eyes. Not a child, not a girl, something inhuman and yet unmistakably her. She raised one hand and pointed directly at me. It's time. I don't know what happened next. I remember screaming, running, something cold brushing my arm, the floor shaking. And then silence. When I woke, I was on the couch, journal in my lap. Windows intact. No broken glass. No sign of movement. The apartment was exactly as I had left it before the tapping began. But I knew. I knew it hadn't been a dream. The fear, the exhaustion, the bruises on my arms, they were real. She was real, and she hadn't gone away. I moved soon after, far away, a house with no windows facing other buildings. Mirrors covered or removed, light, space, normality, or at least what passed for it. And yet I still feel her sometimes. In reflections, in shadows, in the half-second flicker of movement at the edge of my vision, always watching, patient, waiting. I can't explain it. No one can, and I've stopped trying. The stories of my childhood, the boarding school, the farm, the girl in the window, are all fragments of the same truth. There are things that exist beyond our understanding, things that feed on fear, things that wait. And sometimes, when I think I'm safe, I hear the softest tapping at the glass. And I know she's still there,